Fat woman, stay behind me and don't speak in front of my guests.
Kelvin, why are you talking to me like I don't exist?
Because right now you don't need to exist in this conversation.
I paid your school fees for 10 years.
And I told you to stop bringing that up. It's embarrassing.
So I should just pretend I never suffered for you?
You are making this worse for yourself. You should know your place.
My place is your sister, the one who raised you.
Not in front of these people. To them, you are just help. Now leave this place.
I thought the hardest part of my life was already behind me, until the one person I sacrificed everything for looked me in the eye and erased me. The day Kelvin came back from London, I wore my best dress. It was a deep burgundy Ankara, the one I had been saving for a special occasion. I had pressed it the night before with the iron I borrowed from my neighbor, Mrs. Adeyemi, because mine had stopped working 2 months earlier and I had not yet found the money to replace it. I sprayed the only perfume I owned, a small bottle of designer Impostor I had bought at trade fair 3 years ago, and I stood in front of the cracked mirror in my bedroom and told myself, today is the day. Today, everything changes. I believed that. I had been believing it for 10 years. My name is Mariam. I am 32 years old. I live in a 1-bedroom flat in Ojodu, Lagos, the kind of neighborhood that sits in that uncomfortable space between struggling and surviving, where generators roar every night and people are always hustling towards something just slightly out of reach. I have lived in that flat for 7 years. The walls are painted a color that used to be cream and is now something closer to exhaustion. There is a water stain on the ceiling above my bed that I stopped noticing around year 3. But none of that ever bothered me, not really, because I had a plan. I had Kelvin. Our parents died when I was 22 and Kelvin was 17. Our father went first, a stroke that took him on a Wednesday morning while he was getting dressed for work. Our mother lasted 18 months longer, but she was never really there after he died. She moved through the house like a woman already halfway gone, her eyes distant, her laughter absent, her body present, but her spirit somewhere else entirely. When she followed, the doctor wrote cardiac arrest on the certificate. I wrote grief in my heart. I became Kelvin's everything overnight. I was not ready. No 22-year-old is ready to become a parent, but readiness was a luxury I could not afford, so I folded it up neatly and put it away and got to work. I took a job as an administrative assistant in a small logistics company in Ikeja. The pay was poor, barely enough to cover rent and feeding, but I took on extra work wherever I could find it. I typed documents for people at night. I catered small events on weekends. For 2 years, I woke up every day at 5 and did not stop moving until 10 at night. I ate once properly per day during the worst of it, telling myself I was not hungry, when the truth was that there was simply not enough. All of it, every kobo, every exhausted night, every meal I skipped went into Kelvin's education. Secondary school, university here in Lagos, then the scholarship application to study business administration in London that I researched, compiled, and practically wrote myself, staying up 3 nights in a row to meet the deadline while Kelvin slept peacefully in the next room. When the acceptance email came, I read it 4 times before I let myself cry. Happy tears, the kind that feel like a release valve finally opening after years of pressure. That was 3 years ago, and now he was back. His flight had landed at Murtala Mohammed Airport that morning. He had sent me a message the night before. Short, no punctuation, the way young people text now. Landing tomorrow, will come by in the afternoon. I had read it 5 times. I had barely slept. When his car pulled into my street, I was already standing outside. But it was not just his car. There were 2 others behind it, both large, expensive SUVs with tinted windows. They moved slowly down my narrow street, the way wealth moves through spaces that were never designed for it, deliberately, noticeably. Kelvin stepped out first. He looked different, not just older, transformed. His posture had changed, the way he held his jaw, the way his eyes swept the street with a quiet, measuring expression. Something in him had shifted in ways I could not immediately name. He was wearing a crisp white shirt tucked into dark trousers, a watch on his wrist that caught the afternoon light. My heart swelled. I cannot explain it any other way. After everything, after every sacrifice, every skipped meal, every prayer whispered into the dark, this is what I had worked for. This person, this moment. Kelvin! My voice came out softer than I intended, full of something I had been holding for 3 years. He turned. His eyes found me. And then his friends stepped out of the other cars. 2 young men and a woman, and something happened to Kelvin's face. A rearrangement, subtle but unmistakable, the way a person reorganizes their expression when they suddenly become aware of an audience. He smiled at me, then he looked at his friends, then he looked back at me. "Ah, she's here," he said, his voice easy, almost amused. He turned to his friends with the relaxed confidence of someone making a simple introduction. "That's Mariam. She's been managing the house for us. Our housekeeper, basically." The street did not go silent dramatically like it would in a film. The generator from the building across the road kept running. A commercial motorcycle revved somewhere at the junction. Mrs. Adeyemi's television was still audible through her open window. Life kept going. Only I had stopped. I stood in front of my own home in my best dress, smelling of 3-year-old perfume, and I felt something inside me go very, very quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes right before something breaks, the kind that comes right before something breaks. His eyes found me, his friends looked at me, the brief, polite disinterest of people acknowledging staff. One of them nodded. The woman smiled in that practiced, meaningless way. Only one of them, a tall, light-skinned young man with sharp, watchful eyes, looked at me a moment longer than the others. His gaze moved from my face to Kelvin's and back again. He did not smile. He did not look away quickly either. He was paying attention. I didn't know yet that this man would be the one to burn Kelvin's carefully constructed lie to the ground. I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew, standing there in my burgundy Ankara dress on that hot Lagos afternoon, was that my sister had just looked me in the eye. The sister who starved for him, prayed for him, and rebuilt her entire life around his future, and introduced me as the help. And he did it without flinching. Hold on, because the humiliation is only just beginning, and so is the reckoning. I thought maybe I had misheard him. I thought maybe it was a mistake, until I realized he had planned it. I did not confront him that day. I want you to understand why. Because if you have ever loved someone more than they deserved, you will understand. When you have invested a decade of your life into a person, when their success is woven so deeply into your own sense of purpose that separating the two feels impossible, your mind protects you. It finds explanations. It builds small shelters out of excuses so you do not have to stand in the open and face the full weight of what just happened. So I told myself, he was caught off guard. He panicked. He did not know how to explain our situation to these people. He will fix it. I went back inside. I made tea I did not drink. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the laughter drifting in from outside. His laughter, his friend's laughter, and I pressed my palms flat against my thighs and breathed slowly. He will fix it. He will come inside, close the door and say, "Mariam, I am sorry. I did not mean that. Let me go back out there and introduce you properly." He did not come inside. Not in the first hour. Not in the second. Not when the sun began to drop and the streets became loud with evening activity. Not when the sound of those engines faded and the street went quiet again. He texted me at 9 that night. Went out with the guys. Will come by tomorrow. That was all. No explanation, no apology, not even the small mercy of acknowledging what had happened. I put my phone face down on the mattress and lay there in the dark for a long time, staring at the water stain on my ceiling. And I allowed myself, for the first time in years, to feel the full, unfiltered weight of what my life had actually been. I thought about the time in 2017 when Kelvin needed 60,000 naira for his second-year school fees, and I had it, barely, but it was also the same money I had been saving for 12 months to fix my teeth. I had a cracked molar that had been giving me pain for over a year. I paid his fees. I managed the pain with painkillers for another 2 years until a kind dentist at a community outreach treated me for free. I thought about the relationship I had ended because of Kelvin. His name was Tunde. He was good to me, genuinely good, the patient and steady kind of good that is rare and worth holding on to. We had dated for 2 years and he wanted to get married. I wanted to marry him too, but he wanted us to relocate to Abuja, where his business was based, and I could not leave Lagos while Kelvin was still in school here, still needing me close by. Tunde waited. He waited another year, then he stopped waiting. He is married now, has 2 children. I see his photos sometimes. I thought about all the nights I had eaten gari and groundnut for dinner, not because I lacked taste or options, but because there was genuinely nothing else, and I had already allocated every available naira to Kelvin's upkeep, his textbooks, his data subscription so he could study online, his transport, his everything. I had given that boy my 30s. No, I had given him my 20s too. And he had come back and introduced me to his friends as the housekeeper. The next morning, he arrived at 11, alone this time, looking well-rested and completely unbothered. He sat on my small sofa, picked up his phone and started scrolling before he had even properly greeted me. Mariam. My voice was steady. I had practiced being steady. What you said yesterday in front of your friends. Mariam. He looked up briefly, and there was something in his eyes, not cruelty exactly, but a kind of firm impatience, like a person who has already decided how a conversation will go. I stared at him. You called me my housekeeper, I said. To strangers, in front of our neighbors. You called me someone who manages the house, he said, as if the rephrasing made it better. The room was very quiet. Outside somewhere, a car horn sounded. The ceiling fan above us clicked on each rotation, like it had been doing for 2 years. I paid for your entire education, I said quietly. I paid for your WAEC, your university fees, your feeding allowance every month for 6 years. I researched your scholarship. I filled half that application myself. I sat in a business center at midnight to upload your documents before the deadline while you were asleep. He looked at me the way someone looks at an argument they have already decided is irrelevant. And I'm grateful, he said, with a flat tone that was not particularly grateful. But gratitude doesn't mean I have to explain my family's financial situation to people I'm trying to build professional relationships with. You want me to what? Tell them my sister sells food to pay my bills? How does that help either of us? I heard what he said. But more than what he said, I heard what he did not say. He was not ashamed of our poverty. He was ashamed of me. He had made his choice. Now the question was,
Would the truth stay buried? Not for long.
I thought it was over. I thought I would have to carry this shame alone until one person decided he needed answers. His name was Daniel Ose. I learned this later, much later, but let me tell you about him now because he is important. He was Ghanaian, raised in London, the son of a successful architect, the kind of young man who had grown up comfortable enough that he no longer needed to perform wealth for other people. He was part of Kelvin's London circle, classmates who had become close friends over 3 years of shared lectures and late nights in student accommodations. Daniel was the one who had looked at me too long. The morning after Kelvin's dismissive visit to my flat, while Kelvin and his friends were in a hotel in Victoria Island for breakfast, Daniel was asking questions. He was the kind of person who noticed things. He told me this about himself later, that he had always been that way. His mother called it a curse. His father called it good business instinct. He noticed the way I had stood in front of that compound. He noticed that my dress was pressed and deliberate, the way people dress when they are trying to make an impression for someone they care about. He noticed that Kelvin had not introduced me properly and had moved away quickly, the way you move away from something you want to minimize. And he noticed the look on my face. Not the immediate shock. Anyone could miss that. He noticed what came after the shock settled. The stillness. The way I had not argued, not cried, not made a scene. The way I had simply stood there, holding something enormous and private. He recognized it, he told me later, because he had seen his own mother carry pain that same way, quietly, with the dignity of someone who has had long practice at it. He started asking Kelvin small questions over breakfast that morning. Casual questions, the way smart people ask when they want information but do not want you to know they are looking for it. So your family has a housekeeper. That's nice, must be convenient. Kelvin had smiled easily. Yes, she's been with us a while. Very helpful. And your parents, they are still in Lagos? A slightest pause. They passed some years back. Sorry to hear that. So who looked after you when they died? You were quite young, yeah? A longer pause this time. Kelvin picked up his glass of juice. I managed. I had support. Daniel nodded slowly and said nothing more about it at breakfast. But that afternoon, while Kelvin was napping in his hotel room, Daniel drove back to Ojodu alone. He knocked on my door at 3 in the afternoon. I almost did not open it. I did not recognize the car outside, and I was not in the mood for visitors. But something made me open it, and there he was. Tall, calm, holding 2 bottles of cold water from the kiosk outside like a small peace offering. "You're Kelvin's sister," he said. It was not a question. I looked at him for a long moment. "Hey, he told you that?" I asked. "No," Daniel said. "He told me you are the housekeeper, but housekeepers don't stand in front of a house wearing your best dress, waiting for someone to come home." Something in my chest cracked open just slightly. I let him in. We sat at my small dining table, the one with the uneven surface I covered with a tablecloth, and he did not look around my apartment the way people do when they are measuring your poverty. He looked at me directly, the way a person looks when they are actually trying to understand something. "How long did you pay for his education?" he asked. I told him. I did not plan to tell him everything. It just came out, the way water comes out of a container that has been full for too long. 10 years, the jobs, the scholarship application, the relationship I sacrificed, the mullah I lived with for 2 years because I could not afford to fix it and pay his fees at the same time. Daniel sat across from me and listened to every word without interrupting. And when I finished, the apartment was quiet for a long moment. "Does he know you gave all of this?" Daniel asked. I said he was there. He watched me do it. Daniel looks down at the table, then back at me. There was something in his expression that I could not quite read. Not pity, something more complex than pity. "I want to show you something," he said. He pulled out his phone and opened Kelvin's social media profile. He scrolled slowly and turned the screen to me.
There was a post from the previous evening, a photo of Kelvin and his friends at a rooftop bar in Victoria Island, drinks raised, the Lagos skyline glittering behind them. The caption read, "Back home, different level, came far from nothing, self-made energy only." Self-made. I read the word twice. Then I put the phone down carefully on the table, and I looked at the ceiling, and I breathed through my nose for a count of 10, because if I didn't, something was going to happen in my chest that I might not be able to stop. And that post, those two words, self-made, were the beginning of Kelvin's undoing.
I thought I was the only one who knew the truth. I had no idea the truth was already on its way out. If you are waiting for me to tell you that I planned a revenge, that I sat in my apartment and carefully designed Kelvin's fall, I have to be honest with you, I did not. What happened next was not my doing, not directly. I did not make phone calls, I did not leak documents, I did not go to anyone with Kelvin's story looking for justice. I had decided, in that quiet way I had learned to decide things, that I would simply step back, remove myself, close the door on Kelvin's life the way he had effectively closed it on mine, and focus, finally, painfully, deliberately, on myself. But truth has a way of moving without permission. Daniel went back to his hotel and he could not sleep. He told me this afterward. He said he lay in that hotel room in Victoria Island with the air conditioning running and the city glowing outside the window, and he kept thinking about what I had told him, about the mola, about Tunde, about the midnight uploads to meet the scholarship deadline, about the fact that Kelvin's post said self-made when the actual truth was that there was a woman in Ojodu who had unmade herself entirely so he could be made. Daniel came from money, yes, but he had a mother he adored, a woman who had walked alongside his father through the lean years, and he had been raised to understand that there was no such thing as a self-made person, that behind every success was a chain of sacrifice and love and unseen labor that deserved acknowledgement. What Kelvin had done, not just the lie, but the casual comfort of the lie, offended something deep in him. He also knew, as someone in those same academic and professional circles, that Kelvin's scholarship had a code of conduct, a personal integrity clause. Nothing dramatic, but it required that scholarship recipients represent themselves and their backgrounds honestly to their institution and their funding body. It was standard language that most students signed without reading carefully. Daniel read it carefully. He did not go to the scholarship committee immediately. He is not that kind of person. He does not make moves from anger. He went back to Kelvin the next day and gave him one opportunity. They were alone in the hotel room when Daniel brought it up. Daniel said, "I went to see your sister." Kelvin's face did not betray panic immediately. It went through stages. First, a careful stillness, then a flash of something, calculation, then a slow, controlled exhale. Kelvin said, "You told her things, not a question." Daniel said, "She told me the truth, which is different from what you told us." Kelvin, listen. Daniel said, "She paid for everything." Daniel's voice was quiet but immovable. For 10 years, she went without so you could have, and you came back here and called her the housekeeper in front of people, in front of her own neighbors, in front of her own house. Kelvin stood up. He walked to the window. The silence stretched between them like something being slowly pulled until it was about to snap. "You don't understand how these circles work," Kelvin said finally, his voice low. "You grew up with money. You've never had to manage how people perceive you. I can't walk into those rooms carrying a narrative about poverty and a sister who sold food on the road." Daniel said, "So you erased her." Kelvin said, "I reframed the story." Daniel said, "You erased her again, simply." Kelvin turned from the window.
Are you going to report me? Is that what this is? Daniel looked at him for a long moment. I came here to give you a chance to do the right thing yourself, to go to your sister, genuinely apologize and acknowledge publicly, to us at minimum, who she actually is and what she actually did. That is all I am asking. Kelvin's jaw tightened. And if I don't? Daniel picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. He said, then the story tells itself, because it always does. He walked out. Kelvin did not call me. He did not come to Ojodu. He did not post a correction or send a message to his friends. He called his other friend instead and spent the night crafting a version of events in which Daniel was overreacting and Mariam was sensitive and everything was being blown out of proportion. He chose wrong. Because Daniel, the next morning, quietly forwarded a detailed and documented account of what he had witnessed and what I had shared, including the specific language of the scholarship's integrity clause and the social media post with the phrase self-made to the scholarship coordinator back in London. He CC'd the head of the business department. He did not need to do anything dramatic. He just presented facts cleanly with the quiet precision of someone who had been paying attention. And somewhere in London, in an office Kelvin had never worried about, someone opened an email.
I thought the worst was over for me. I did not know Kelvin had not yet seen the worst of what was coming for him. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Thursday. Kelvin called me. Not to apologize, I need to be clear about that. He called me because he was panicking, and I was still in his mind the person who existed to help him when things went wrong. Mariam, his voice was different from every other version of his voice I had ever known. The London polish was gone. The careful confidence he had won since he stepped off the plane was completely stripped away. What was left underneath sounded terrifyingly familiar. It sounded like the 17-year-old boy I had taken to bury his mother, frightened, young, out of depth. The scholarship office called me, he said. They want a meeting, a formal one. They are talking about a review. I said nothing. Mariam, I need you to. If anyone contacts you, I need you to tell them that things were taken out of context, that Daniel misunderstood, that our relationship is... Mariam, my voice came out very calm, calmer than I expected. What exactly do you want me to tell them? Tell them we are family, that what I said was a joke, or it was... He stumbled. It was a cultural thing, something that got lost in translation. These people don't understand how Nigerians talk. You want me to lie, I said, for you, again. The silence on the phone was very long. You've been lying about me for years, I said quietly, to yourself and to everyone around you. You told your friends I was your maid. You posted on social media that you are self-made. You built an entire identity on top of everything I did, and then you painted over me like I was a wall you are renovating. And now the paint is peeling and you want me to come and cover it again. Mariam, I'm not going to do that, I said. Not this time. I ended the call. The scholarship review took 3 weeks. It was thorough. The committee contacted me directly, professionally, respectfully, and I answered every question they asked, honestly and without drama. I did not exaggerate. I did not perform grief or anger for them. I simply told them the timeline, the fees, the application process, the years. I sent them documents I had kept, receipts, transfer records, email threads from the scholarship application that had my email address on them, the one Kelvin had used when applying because he did not yet have a stable internet account of his own. The documents spoke. The scholarship was formally suspended pending a full investigation into misrepresentation. Kelvin's funding for his final year was frozen. His accommodation support was cancelled. 2 of his London friends, people whose respect he had worked so hard to perform for, quietly distanced themselves once the details circulated in their small, close-knit academic circle.
The social media post came down, but not before someone had screenshotted it and it had moved through group chats in ways Kelvin could not control. His reputation in those circles, the one he traded his own sister to build, began to come apart at the seams. He came to Ojodu one last time. He did not call ahead. He knocked on my door on a Sunday evening, and when I opened it, the person standing in front of me looked like someone who had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. The watch was gone. The crisp shirts were gone. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and the kind of expression a person wears when they have run out of angles to walk through. He said, "I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long time, and I realized, standing there in my apartment I had lived alone for years, that the apartment I had always imagined living one day with Kelvin's help now felt like something I would live on my own terms or not at all. I realized that I did not feel anger anymore. I felt something colder, more final. I felt the end of something. "I know you are," I said. "I believe you. But sorry doesn't rebuild what you tore down. And I cannot keep being the place you come back to when everything else falls apart." "You are my sister," he said. The word landed differently than it used to. "Yes, I am. And you forgot that when it mattered." I closed the door. And on the other side of that door, I stood alone in my apartment, and I made myself a promise. The first promise I had made for myself in 10 years. I thought rebuilding after betrayal would feel like loss. I did not know it would feel like breathing for the first time. The weeks after I closed that door were strange. I will not pretend they were immediately beautiful or that healing arrived quickly like a resolution in a film. It did not. There were nights I sat with my phone in my hand and thought about calling him. Not out of forgiveness, not yet, but out of something closer to muscle memory. For 10 years, Kelvin's needs had structured my days. His school calendar had been my calendar. His milestones had been my milestones. When something good happened, my first instinct was to call him. When something difficult happened, same thing. Learning to stop reaching for that instinct was like learning to walk without leaning on something. But I learned. The first thing I did was sleep, properly, deeply, without a mental list of things I needed to provide for someone else running in the background. I slept for 9 hours on a Saturday and woke up to nothing but my own life. No one waiting for money, no deadline I had created for someone else, no sacrifice I needed to make before breakfast. It felt, honestly, slightly terrifying, and then quietly wonderful. Daniel called me 2 weeks after everything had settled. He was back in London, professional and warm, checking that I was okay. He had connected me with a woman in his network, a Lagos-based entrepreneur who ran a small consulting firm and was looking for a sharp administrative manager. He said he had told her about me. I asked him what exactly he had told her. "The truth," he said simply, "that you are the most competent, most resilient person I encountered in Lagos, and that you have been running someone else's life for a decade, and it is time you ran your own." I got the job. It was not a miracle. It was not a dramatic transformation overnight. The salary was modest, but it was real, and it was mine, and no portion of it was leaving my account to fund someone else's dreams. I bought myself a new iron. A small thing, laughable maybe, but I stood in the shop and held that iron, and I thought, this is mine. I bought this for myself. No one else's need came before this. I cried in the shop. The shop owner probably thought I was unwell. I also slowly and carefully began to make a list. Everything I had put on hold, everything I had told myself later after Kelvin is sorted, the business idea I had carried for years, a small catering supply company, connecting home bakers and small food businesses with quality ingredients at fair prices. I had researched it. I had a business plan that I had written in notebooks over the years, in stolen moments, in the margins of receipts. It had always felt like a fantasy for someone else's life. I registered the business in March. By June, I had my first 3 clients. By the end of the year, I had moved out of the Ojodu apartment. Not far, I could not afford far yet, but far enough. A cleaner space, more light, a ceiling without a water stain. I put nothing on the walls except one thing, a photograph of my parents taken at their wedding. My father in a dark suit, laughing at something outside the frame. My mother beside him, small and radiant, her whole future still ahead of her. I looked at that photograph and I spoke to them sometimes in the evenings, the way you speak to people you are trying to keep close. I am okay, I told them. I kept my promise to you. I carried him as far as I could. The rest is his to carry. As for Kelvin, he did not disappear off the earth. Life is not a folk tale where the villain vanishes. He was still out there, navigating the consequences of his choices, working out how to rebuild something from the rubble of the reputation he had constructed on top of my name. I heard through a distant relative that he had returned to Lagos permanently, his scholarship situation making another year abroad complicated. I heard he was working, starting over in a quieter, humbler way. I did not feel satisfaction at this. I want to be honest about that. I felt something more complicated, a kind of sorrow that I had stored somewhere deep, the sorrow of watching someone you raised make choices you could not save them from. But I also felt free. And free, I was learning, was not nothing. Free was in fact everything. There is something I want to say to you before we close this story, because I believe there is a reason you stayed until the end. If you are the Mariam in your own life, the one who gives and quietly disappears behind someone else's story, I want you to hear this. Your sacrifice is not invisible, even when the person you sacrifice for pretends not to see it. The truth always surfaces. It cannot stay buried indefinitely. But more than that, more than hoping someone else will expose the lie, the most powerful thing you can do is decide one quiet day to finally start building something with your name on it. Not as a backup plan, not after everyone else is sorted. Now, today. You are not anyone's footnote. You are the whole story. If this story moved you, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and stay with us.